Hi, everyone.
God, I can't see anybody. Hey,
Yeah,
guys.
It's really bright up here. So the title of this session is called The Road Less Traveled. And so we're talking about non-traditional career paths. So I would love to maybe start by saying who in the audience has what they consider a non-traditional career path. Okay, a lot of you people. All right, and then the rest of you I assume, are aspiring to do that. So I'd love to just to jump in and hear about your non-traditional career paths. Can you guys just tell me how you started out and then how you made the decision to make a major switch?
Right on. You want to go or?
Kick it off.
All right, I'm doing this without the beers that Saka had, so I'll try my best. Hey guys, my name is Mazzeo. I run a fund called Lowercase Capital. I wasn't always doing this sort of career path. Before I actually started right out of college, I fell ass backwards into a job in entertainment. How many of you know CAA or have heard the firm? In 2005, it was one of the largest, and still is one of the largest entertainment agencies in the world. They had about half the marketplace at the time in terms of representing talent like Will Smith, Steven Spielberg, Tom Hanks, Tom Cruise. And I started at the very bottom as an assistant to an assistant there, and sort of had to convince them to let me into the mailroom. Literally had to beg to be paid below minimum wage, literally delivering mail all over town on behalf of scripts and stories all over town. And then finally made my way up through that agency and basically started a division of the firm. Again, to put you in time, Facebook was still on college campuses. YouTube hadn't won the video war. Twitter hadn't been invented. Instagram hadn't been invented. But pitched the idea that we would be able to represent talent that was internet first and build a division focused on how entertainment and tech would start to interact. And so it was one part representing new talent, people like Michelle Phan, where I would sign them, help develop them, and help them build businesses. It was one part representing tech companies and basically being a navigator for them in entertainment. And so companies like Tencent, Qualcomm, Cisco, as well as startups like RockYou and Meebo and Ustream, if you remember those guys. And then the other side was actually building companies from scratch. So Funny or Die was sort of the first one that we built a business plan, raised venture funding, and then pitched the comedy talent of the agency to build those things out. And so you
were basically the venture startup guy inside a traditional agency.
For 8 years, if you were trying to approach any of the talent of the agency, the music talent, the comedy talent, TV talent, sports talent, and you had a pitch on a startup, I was the person you sat with. If you were a tech company and you were like, hey, we want to navigate the studios, networks, sports teams, leagues, or brands, I was the guy. I was also the weird entertainment guy back in 2006-07 at South by Interactive and YC, and so playing this weird, non-traditional role in those two worlds.
So how did you decide to go from being the weird entertainment guy to the traditional venture guy?
I'd gotten to know Chris, my partner, over the course of that 8-year period. More and more of his companies, Kickstarter, Twitter, Instagram, started having major impact on our clients. And so I was the one that was always trying to push our clients further into understanding themselves, not just as talent, but as distribution too. And Chris just became sort of my guide in that world in a lot of ways. And so as he had companies that wanted to understand entertainment, I was his sort of Sherpa, and vice versa. And we got to know each other just by virtue of yelling at each other all the time about what we thought the world would become.
That's a great way to apply for a job.
What, yelling at your
yell
future
at your
partner?
Future boss.
Yeah, exactly. Frankly, we still do it today. So that's the only way we know how to communicate is to loud Italian kids. And if you guys saw Chris, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But that was it. That was the path. It's just we started debating the future of where we saw media and entertainment and tech, and eventually was we need to just do this together. And so came on and joined for funds 2 and 3, and he was like, I'll train you in everything you don't know about venture, and you'll be able to sort of build your own career path here. And if you're good enough, you'll be able to take over the fund. So that's what we did, and on Fund 4, I took over as managing director.
What's the biggest challenge you faced in making that switch?
I think the biggest challenge is that people pigeonhole you. Forever, you sort of your resume, it very easily defines you, and this is one of the challenges that I think everybody faces is how do you not just look like your background and continue to push down those paths? And I think Chris is dealing with this now, right? He's a guy who's got many interests, and he's not just an investor, and he wants to pursue all these other paths, but you actually have to put out a blog post saying, I'm not just an investor, I'm actually doing these other things.
And people still don't believe it.
And people still don't believe him. So I think that's one of the challenges is you have to continually be showcasing that there are other parts of your personality and your interest base. And so at the beginning, I just got pitched everything in media. Every artist that I used to work with, anybody that had your YouTube MCN or your entertainment business. And I spent a lot of time in the early days. My first few investments were totally afield from that. So I was doing
just to try to like basically tell people, look, I'm more than the
No,
weird entertainment guy.
because frankly, that's what I was interested in, is like
Yeah.
not just the media stuff, but applying the lessons of like, how do you tell a story? How do you think about like building a narrative for the company? How do you think about building pitch decks and raising that next round? And then it applies to a bunch of different industries and businesses. And frankly, it's like where my skill set was most asymmetric. It's like helping the team at Mark 43 tell their story about GovTech and law enforcement tech was as impactful as it was for any media company or talent that I was working with. And so it was just a natural progression.
That's awesome. Will?
All right, I'll try to run through this quickly. Hey everyone, Will Gaybrick, CFO at Stripe. So I'll start back in college, because you did as well. So I studied math in college, wanted to be a mathematician, which would have been a very different path than I ended up taking. My parents told me it was a terrible idea, and so I compromised with them, and I did something very funny, which was I went to Blackstone, about as commercial as you can get, and
That's the massive private equity firm that owns
Exactly.
everything that you probably don't even realize.
Exactly, and started a math PhD at the same time. And so I did that for about a year and a half, and sort of precipitously left to become an engineer. I started working for a guy named Chris Dixon, partner in Andreessen Horowitz. He had a company called Hunch. It was his second company based out of New York. In fact, Erin, you and I sort of narrowly missed each other. I left Hunch soon before you were joining Pando.
So you jumped from private equity to startup.
Yep. And was an engineer for about 5 years. I snuck in law school along the way, and kept working as an engineer sort of remotely while I was at law school. And in law school, I started doing actually what Chris does. I started building a venture firm in New York called Thrive Capital. And there's another sort of road less traveled story there about building a venture firm in New York rather than in the Valley or out west. At any rate, did that for 5 years, had the privilege of investing in Stripe, led the C2 round on behalf of Thrive back in late 2014, and about a year after that, got a text message from my boss, Patrick, and saying, do you want to come explore being the CFO at Stripe? And have now been there for about a year and a half.
So, and what was the biggest challenge that you faced in all of these different, to use a terrible startup cliche, pivots that you've made throughout your career?
A lot of learning and relearning. At the same time, I will say there's a lot that carries over from the venture side to sort of the Stripe side. For one, your mission, sort of what gets you out of bed in the morning, and Matt, I'd be curious to hear if this is similar for you. As an investor, was helping companies, like helping entrepreneurs fulfill their visions. That's sort of why we're here today at sort of this giant tech conference. It's how can you empower entrepreneurs to build incredible businesses, and at Thrive, that was sitting on boards, and it was working with a dozen companies, helping them make their most important decisions, hire people, sort of very deep in the weeds. At Stripe, it's a very similar mission, right? It's sort of growing the GDP of the internet economy, empowering entrepreneurs, but doing it in a very leveraged way. So working with hundreds of thousands of businesses across dozens of countries around the world. And so a lot carries over from what I did in venture to the Stripe world.
One thing that's kind of interesting about both of your stories is that you kind of like attached yourselves to a very strong, well-known, successful person. I've done that a little bit in my career too. Do you think that's important, or do you think that somebody trying to make a big dramatic switch can also do it by just striking out on their own?
There's definitely no one path, but I'm a firm believer that like almost every industry is really an apprentice industry, and you have to find somebody willing to like show you the ropes, let you sort of, give you enough to hang yourself with, beat you up, and when you've made mistakes, and who knows enough and cares enough to like actually take the time to criticize you. And when you find those people who are willing to like give you that air cover and let you run, it's like invaluable mentorship and guidance. And so I don't care what industry you're in, but I can point to people throughout each part of my career trajectory who like took that bet on me and let me do something that I was wholly unqualified for, and like covered me and beat me up when I needed it. And so I think it was actually one of the pivots in my career.
Well?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say that whatever business you're building, whether it's a venture capital firm, whether it's a growth stage company, Stripe, it's sort of Series D and beyond, or it's an early stage company, a seed stage company. Patrick, Stripe's CEO, said something to me the other day. He said, whenever you're sort of whatever place you're at in your company, the previous 3x, the growth from a third of the size you are today to where you are today, always feels inevitable, and the next 3x always feels like impossible, or it feels very hard. And so to to your question, Erin, about attaching yourself to the right people and finding the right people to work with, no matter where you are, you're going to face so many challenges along the way, and you're going to be working through those with people who hopefully complement your skill sets, who are like-minded in their approach. And so I think attaching yourself to the right people is really the name of the game.
There are a lot of stories, and there's a lot of data that shows that millennials and the younger generation don't really have careers where they get a job and they keep it for 30 years, and people are jumping around a lot. Do you think it's getting easier for people to move very fluidly between different industries and make major career shifts?
Can I jump in on that one?
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
Well, so I think one thing that's really interesting on that point is just if you look at, one of the things we're all jumping to, it's starting companies. And you look 15 years ago at, I think it was the CB Insight stats about the amount of money it took to actually launch a company, and it was $5 million. And you look at it today, and the stat, I'm not exactly sure it's calculated, is $5,000. So literally 2 orders of magnitude decrease in terms of the capital required to start a company. At the same time, all the venture coffers are completely flush, and there's so much money available to startups.
That means there's a lot of really bad ideas that are getting off the ground.
Yes. Well, there's certainly a lot less friction to getting those ideas off the ground, and so you see this giant proliferation of companies. And so I think that retraining, retooling, moving among industries is one question, but for me, one of the most interesting trends that we're seeing at Stripe is just how many companies are being created, how many people are flocking to create companies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I want to point to I think actually there's a real advantage, frankly, to staying within one category and one industry and with a team over a period of years. Maybe I'm just
So the opposite of what you've done.
Yeah, no, I'm selling my own book. I did exactly that. I spent 8 years at one company. I've had two companies total in my career post college. And it took me the first 2 years to figure out where the bathroom was. It took me and to figure out which mentors I really wanted. It took me the next 3 years to start getting my wheels under me and understand how to do deals correctly and understand and make the mistakes that maybe made me a little bit better at it. And then maybe it took me 2 more years to firm up achievements in it. And I think today you have, rightfully so, and Reid put out a really interesting book. Reid Hoffman put out a great book, The Alliance, that's all around this idea of tours of duty and trying to accomplish projects and reimagining the career around specific milestones. But for me, I think frankly, that took years to build that kind of mentorship, and to be able to now that I've left entertainment, still go back and call any one of my clients, any one of my friends, any of the people at studios or networks. It took years to be that. And if you're just a mercenary that's jumping 2 years, you're almost in and out and gone, and it's really hard to build the deeper ties and the relationships that I think become really valuable. Securing that network is something that I think is something that people have underestimated. They've treated it like a mercenary skill set approach, and I just didn't do that at all. I've now spent 5 years at Lowercase, and so I don't know. I think I think maybe it's a little counterintuitive, but finding a place where you can grow and shift your career in progress, but still establish long-term roots, I think will go to benefit a lot of people who sort of take the counter.
It's not a matter of leaving it all behind when you switch. It's a matter of taking that with you, it sounds like you're saying.
I think it's really hard to take it with you, to take anything with you after 2 years. I think that's just a really hard thing to do.
All right, so what other advice do you have for entrepreneurs looking to make or for people in the tech industry looking to make a major change? And I would also like to hear what advice you have for people who are looking to get into venture capital. A lot of people want to do VC investing, and it's really hard to break into.
You want to take one, I'll take the other?
Sure.
All right, I'll do VC. So I think there's 3 things that really matter depending on your stage of VC. One is site, the other is selection, the other is service. And anybody can do venture capital if you can compellingly tell people who have a lot of capital that you're great, exceptional, not just at one, not just at the other, but all 3 of the above. And so
venture capital is just a salesmanship game.
I think if you go to an LP and you can convincingly say, I have superior sight, I see all of the deals that I would want to do, and I can execute it by virtue of my brand, a proprietary network, something along those lines. If you can convincingly go and tell an LP that, this is for people that are building a new fund, that you can raise money. If you also can say, not only can I do that, but I can select the best deals. And here's a track record, whether it's financial or literally posting out here are the decisions that I've made and the companies that I'm betting on, and you publicly do it. I actually don't know why more people who want to get into venture don't post out their early stage bets, when they would have made them, and a thesis for it.
Well, why wouldn't they just say, I would have done Airbnb,
you do it in time, you timestamp it. So,
Got it.
Erin Battalion actually, who's a friend and investor at Lightspeed, I think wrote a post around this, where he was I would create a portfolio right now, a theoretical portfolio. Go out and find seed stage companies, and post to a portfolio page where you're like, these are the companies that I would pick, and here's the reason why and how I would help.
You just launched 100 blog posts.
I actually think it's a really compelling art, and I've seen that from a lot of students who like send me that presentation of like, here's 5 companies, here's why I would have made the investment, and I've tracked down a couple based on those posts. The last one is actually service, so like you have to reliably say how you're differentiated so that you could win those deals in the event that you select the right ones.
Yeah.
So how am I going to help you more than other people? What is my experience, my skill set, whether it's a weird background in media and entertainment that helps you tell a different story, or whether it's an engineering background or a finance background, you have to be willing to sort of like pitch to a founder and an investor why you're different and can help. And so if you can nail all 3 of those and look yourself in the mirror saying, I'm willing to take friend, family money and investor money, then you can go out and build a fund.
And Will, more generally?
Advice to people who want to get into technology generally?
Yeah, or to make a big switch into technology.
So I'm going to give a sort of generic answer, but one that I think is still the right answer. Learn to code. I think that is the single...
Learn to cope.
Learn to code.
And
Code,
cope.
got
And
it,
cope.
yeah.
Learn to emotionally cope.
You will certainly have to do both. No, but I think it's so empowering to be able to build things on your own, and it's so disempowering to be constantly constrained for engineering resources. It's funny, is we look at Stripe, and at all of our users, like our fundamental constraint is not capital. It's not sales resources or marketing resources. It is engineering bandwidth, again and again and again, over and over and over. And it was that when we were a seed stage company, and it'll be that 5 years hence.
That is the lifeblood of your company.
It is. And so it's funny, when I was actually in law school in New Haven, I had a bunch of undergrads with great ideas coming to me and saying, hey, I know you're a good engineer. Well, I wasn't a good engineer. I know you're an engineer. And can you help me build this thing? And that was always their first question. It's like, yeah, I didn't have the bandwidth to do it. Or do you have friends in New York who could build it for me? And it's like, yes, all my friends in New York are sitting on their hands waiting for Yale undergrads to tell them what to build. And so what I decided after a while is I'm just going to teach them all. And so I started something called Hack Yale, where I taught hundreds of kids to code. And it's just so empowering when you can start to build it yourself. And so this is a skill set. It is a knowledge base that you can self-serve off the internet. There is this incredible proliferation of tools, Amazon Web Services, Twilio, Stripe, that enables you to build things faster and more quickly and get to market quickly. And so that would be my number 1 piece of advice.
Can I give one other? So
Yes, please.
As a no-coding, talentless ass, I think there's still other ways to do it too if you want to get into startup land, and that's I actually give this advice to students all the time, which is make a grid in a spreadsheet. Here's like a really tactical, not like just like explore tech. Really tactically, make a spreadsheet of companies that have raised seed or Series A funding in the last 6 months. All of those companies are probably going to be hiring in the near future. Write down on that grid like the founder, their Twitter handle, summarize the mission of the company, the city that they're in, and basically you have to go through and start pretending you worked at the company and see would you be willing to brag about the mission of the company. And if that's the case, once you've done that exercise, literally just start hunting down people that work at the company and adding value to them. How many people know who Ryan Graves is in this audience? A small number. So Ryan Graves is the most epic version of this. He was similarly a no-coding clown at GE, and basically on Twitter reached out to Travis in a blind tweet to say, I love what you're building, like, you should hire me. He ended up becoming the first CEO of Uber. And that tweet ended up earning him a few $1 billion. But like that proactive hunt down of a company that he really wanted to be involved with, I think speaks to like, even if you can't code, which I still think is an incredible advice and skill set, you can still get involved just by hunting a founder down and saying, I love your mission, I care about what you're doing, I've already done these things to add value, and I don't care what you hire me for, I'm going to come into your business and I'm going to make an impact on what you're doing. And it's really hard for a founder to hear somebody like that and not want to hire them, I think.
Okay, so we have just 2 minutes left, and I know you were hoping to run out the clock on this question, but I do want to ask you very quickly, how did you take the retirement news when Chris Sacca announced he's retiring, and will that change what you're doing? There was a report that said you're joining a firm called Binary Capital. You said you can't comment on that, but what can you tell us about what it might change what you're doing?
This has been part of the plan, I think, forever, candidly. When I joined the fund, it was very much, if you're good enough on funds 2 and 3, you can go out and try to raise your own fund under the banner of Lowercase. And so I was able to do that, and sort of over the last 3 years, I've been managing another seed stage fund on our behalf. And it became very apparent over those few years that like Chris wanted to step back and had other interests in other categories. He had 3 baby girls under 5 years old. He was obviously, if anybody follows his Twitter, extremely active in the resistance. Literally, his cowboy shirt had the resistance hidden in a message on the shirt if you didn't see it on stage. So
I missed that one.
yeah, it's like a little, it's an Easter egg for Chris. So I think this was always his intent to step back. And for me, it was like, this is frankly, I'm just getting started. I love what I get to do and work with teams and early companies. And so as long as I can spend the next 10 years building that skill set and getting to work with more founders, I will absolutely get to do that.
And will you make another career pivot? Do you foresee yourself making another completely non-traditional switch somewhere along the way?
I mean, right now we've got 5% of internet commerce, of global commerce is on the internet. I think
Stripe is powering 5% of global internet
no,
commerce.
just commerce globally, 5% is on the internet.
Got it. And how much of that is Stripe?
Can't comment on that.
Will sees everything.
He knows what you're buying.
But I think, let's get that 5 to 50, and then I'll think about, what's after Stripe.
Wow.
All right, fantastic. Well, thank you guys so much. This was great.
Thanks. Thanks, guys.